Hello, before moving forward with the formal presentation of NaxusAI, allow me to give you a very quick summary in a couple of minutes of what this platform is capable to do. With this platform, you're going to be able to monitor your GitHub repositories and find vulnerabilities inside the existing source code, and also monitor pull requests and merges that are happening inside those repositories in order to find, vulnerabilities or backdoors that might be introduced in those changes. In any case, so how can this platform also find vulnerabilities inside the existing code inside your repository, even if it is a very big repository? Well, this is thanks to the graph database that NaxusAI starts generating whenever you start monitoring a new repository. And it is because in this graph we are going to be finding all the classes, functions, and everything interesting inside the code, and how every piece of code is related to each other, all the dependencies. This way, whenever we want to audit a specific function, we are going to be able to get the code of the function and of all the functions and classes it is depending on. So whenever the LLM receives this information in order to check for vulnerabilities, it is actually getting all the context that it needs from that function without getting more context that is unnecessary. We are not just copy pasting all the code that you have in a repository and sending it to an LLM. We are getting the exact pieces of code that we need in order to check the security of a specific node of a specific function or a specific class, and giving only that to the LLM. Moreover, we also can find all the exposed nodes, all the functions, classes that are being exposed. For example, imagine a web API. A node exposed will be a function that a user can call accessing a specific URL. So we are going to be finding all the nodes that attackers can find, and we are going to be able to trigger audits starting from those nodes. This way, NaxusAI is going to be able to audit all the code that is related and that is accessible from attackers, checking all the dependencies. This way, you're going to be able to find all the vulnerabilities that attackers might reach. And now let's get started with the formal presentation of NaxusAI. Hello, let me introduce you the new NaxusAI platform. This platform is going to allow you to find vulnerabilities in your source code using LLMs and graphs. So it's going to be pretty amazing. If you go here to www.naxusai.com, you're going to be able to find the landing page, and of course here you will be able to find a lot of information about the platform, the product, and everything. But of course, if we want to start using it, first we will need to log in. In the login process, you will be asked to log in using your GitHub account, giving some access to the repos that you want to check using this platform. And after you have logged in, you will be presented this kind of overview dashboard. Of course, here I have already used the dashboard, so I have some information. For you, most of this will be still blank, but no worries, because we will see how you can configure your platform in order to start testing for vulnerabilities your own source repositories. So the first thing you will need to do is to go to the settings tabs right here and put your OpenAI API key. And this is because at this point in time, in order to use the platform, in order to use the LLMs, you will need to bring your API key. So at this point in time, the platform is free, but of course you will be needing to pay for the use of the OpenAI. And of course, if you want to also use some Anthropic models in order to test for vulnerabilities your repositories, you will also need to indicate your Anthropic API key. In any case, the Open API key is actually required, because in order to generate the graphs, we will be using this API key. So this one is the only one required. Moreover, here you can see that you are going to be able to select the models that you want to use whenever you are auditing, or wherever the platform is auditing the code. So here you're going to be presented with all the models that are supported at this point in time by the platform, where you're going to be able to find a lot of models from OpenAI and Anthropic, of course. And here you can see that there are two different places where you need to indicate the models that the platform is going to be using. And this is because the platform is actually going to be able to audit every pull request and merge or commit that happens in the repo that it is monitoring. And also because later we will see that you can actually request to search for vulnerabilities on specific endpoints inside your repository. So the models that you select here are the ones that are going to be looking for vulnerabilities and issues in all the pull requests and merges or commit that your repositories are getting, while these models are the ones that are going to be using whenever you go to the visualization of each repository and click on please scan these assets. Later we will see what I am talking about. Okay, so here you should be selecting the models that you want to use. In my case, I'm just using for both cases the same models, O4 mini and O3. Then here we can configure the monitoring. As I have just commented to you, this platform is able to monitor pull requests and commits. So every time a pull request is open over your repository, or every time a merge is happening in your repository, the platform is going to be receiving the details of the merge or the pull request, and is going to try to find issues, vulnerabilities, or backdoors inside this pull request or each merge. Of course, you can enable or disable any of these monitorings, and also you can enable or disable to check every pull request and every commit with more context. Of course, if you want to monitor the pull requests and commits, which is recommended, it is recommended to also leave this enable text with context, because the more context the LLM is getting, the better to find backdoors or vulnerabilities in every pull request or commit that is happening inside your repository. Moreover, if you allow the platform to monitor these pull requests and commits, the way the platform is going to interact with you is by putting messages or comments inside the pull request. So whenever a new pull request is open in your repository, NaxusAI is going to start scanning it, and whenever it finishes, it will open a comment inside the pull request. This comment will say, I didn't find anything, or it will list all the vulnerabilities, backdoors, security issues that NaxusAI was able to find inside that specific pull request. Okay, so NaxusAI is going to be able to open comments, to create comments inside the pull request, indicating what is happening. In the case of commits or merges inside the repository, what is going to be happening is that a new issue is going to be created. So imagine that you merge some code that is creating a new vulnerability or that is adding a new backdoor inside the repository. NaxusAI will be detecting this and opening a new issue saying, hey, I detected this in this merge. Please, you should take a look to this. So this is how the monitoring is going to be communicating with you to let you know what is happening in those pull requests and commits. And finally, regarding the plans, at this point in time, you can use the platform for free, as we have commented. You can monitor up to 10 repositories. There is some limit in the repository size to 1,000 files at this point in time, which might increase in the future. You can do this automated peer and commit analysis. You can audit or monitor public and private repositories, access the graph view, use the full context analysis. Later we will talk about this because it's the most interesting part of this platform, definitely. Although for the free version, you need to use your own API keys. If you are a company and you are interested in actually maybe running NaxusAI locally in your on-premise services, or getting help with the settings, or getting somebody to take a look to the vulnerabilities and help you mitigate those, please contact us in the email that you have here. Okay, so moving on, now we are going to learn how we can configure a new repository to monitor it. So we go to the repositories tab in here, and you can see in this message all the languages that NaxusAI at this point in time is supporting. And here we have Python, JavaScript, TypeScript, Java, Go, and Solidity. For the moment, these are the ones that we are supporting. And in order to start monitoring or auditing some repositories, you can just indicate the GitHub repository you want to add, because whenever you log in inside this application, inside this platform, you're going to be requested to indicate the repositories you want to give NaxusAI access to. And then when you click on this Manage Repositories button, you're going to be able to find all your repositories or all the repositories you gave NaxusAI access in this table. And in order to start monitoring a new repository, you just need to click here on Monitor, Save, and the new repository will be added and the monitoring will start. Okay, we just added this one. These are two other repositories that I am already monitoring, and I will I will just show you a little bit of the visualization, the graphs that were created, and the vulnerabilities that were discovered. But before we start checking details of specific repositories, let me show you that you can also manually add repositories, uploading a zip file containing all the code, indicating the repository name and some description of the repository. Okay, of course, in this case, if you upload a zip repository, well, the platform is not going to be monitoring pull requests or commits, because of course it doesn't have access to any GitHub repo that is receiving those pull requests and commits. But you will still be able to use NaxusAI in order to find vulnerabilities in that repository. How can you do that? Well, whenever you add a GitHub repository or a manually added repository, what is going to be happening is that a graph is going to be start generating. Okay, NaxusAI is going to be able to understand all the parts of your codes, and with parts I mean classes, functions, global variables, global code, all the dependencies, all the relationships between files in your code, and then it is going to be able to find all the dependencies on each node of your code. So imagine that, for example, a function is calling a different function of a different file. NaxusAI is going to be able to find this, and it is going to be relating those two functions inside a graph database. The goal of this is that whenever we want to audit, for example, a function that is calling another function that is calling another function, we are going to be able to get the context of the code of those functions and send all that code to the LLM. The goal of this is to give the LLM all the context it needs in order to audit a function without sending it too much context. So, because a different option to this will be to, for example, just get whole files and send them to the LLMs and say, hey, audit this. Of course, that is going to be useless. It's not going to be very optimized, because of course there are big repositories that you cannot just cut all the code and send it to the LLM, because the context is going to be overloaded. The LLM is not going to be supporting so much context. And if you reduce the context, also the responses of the LLM is going to be better. So the goal of NaxusAI is to minimize the context that we get from a specific audit that we want to trigger, and then send it to the LLM to audit it. And we will see this better with an example. So, for example, if we go to visualize the Helm repository, let's give it a second. Here we have it. This is a very big repository, as you can see, and here we can find all the relationships that NaxusAI was able to find just checking to the code. Okay, so here we have, for example, a function. Here we have a file. Here we have a class, and we should also have some global functions around, some global code. What else do we have here? Well, you can see here that, well, it is actually discovering, for example, this class, and then it is also discovering the dependencies of this class, and also how other nodes are depending on this class, which basically means that if somebody triggers an audit of a node that is depending on this class, the code of this class is also going to be added into this audit. Okay, so we are able to find all the context that we need in order to audit. So let's continue. How can we audit? Okay, so whenever you start monitoring a repository, NaxusAI in the background is going to be generating this graph for you. It might take maybe 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. It will depend on the size of the repository. But after the graph is created, you can just come here and start checking and poking around and checking all the nodes that were created. Now, imagine that, for example, you're interested because you know that this function is very, very sensitive and is exposed somehow, and attackers might be able to contact or to trigger this function. You have here a couple of interesting buttons, which is audit from node and audit using node. Audit from node basically means that you are going to be requesting NaxusAI to get this node and all the dependencies of this node and audit it. This is interesting because if you identify all the functions or all the classes, all the nodes that are exposed and attackers might be able to interact with them, well, you're going to be able to click in this audit from node, and you are going to be auditing exactly the code that is needed to audit. You can also press this audit using node, which basically means that NaxusAI in the background is going to be finding all the paths inside this graph database that somehow reaches this node, and is going to be checking all those paths, all those contexts, all that code. Okay, so this way, imagine that you find a function that is able to execute code, and you want to check that all the functions that are actually calling this function are secure. You could just go to the function that executes arbitrary code and click on audit using node, and all the paths that is using these dangerous functions are going to be audited. So in the explanation I was just giving, I mentioned something interesting, which is the term of exposed nodes. An exposed node, as I indicated, are all those nodes that can be accessed by attackers. For example, if we are checking a web API, the nodes will be all the functions that are actually exposed as web APIs and therefore can be triggered by attackers. Why are we interested in this? Because from a security analysis perspective, usually we don't need to check the complete code of a repository. And this is because attackers are usually not going to be able to access or to trigger all the code or to control all the arguments of the functions inside all the code. They are only going to be able to trigger and control some input inside these exposed nodes. So if we can find all the exposed nodes and trigger this audit from node button we just explained from them, where we are going to be actually checking the security of the project and limiting the context of the audit to the relevant code. So this is great because we are actually going to be checking only what needs to be checked. We are not going to be checking things that an attacker cannot access. And this, of course, is going to be reducing the number of false positives. So how we can do that in an easy manner? Because one way will be to be searching ourselves for all the nodes that are exposed. Click here on the expose tick that you have here, and then it will mark as expose the node. However, this is going to be very time consuming. So we have a special function and a special button here that is called set exposure. If we click on this set exposure button, we are granted some options, and here we can indicate, for example, that hey, I want to set as exposure all the functions that have the string post, for example. And this way we are going to be exposing all the functions, all the nodes that are a function that inside the function name have the string post. Or maybe we want to expose all the classes that have the string handler, for example, inside the name of the class. And this way, well, we will be exposing this kind of node. Or maybe we want to expose all the all the .php files, or all the files with a path regex or whatever. Maybe we are interested in exposing all the files that are inside services, inside this folder, so we can indicate it right here. We have also some more intelligent way to do this, which is, for example, we want to, the NaxusAI knows about some specific frameworks, for example, Flask, and here we can enable Flask get and post detection or enable Flask root detection, and this way we will be exposing all the known Flask functions that are exposed as web APIs. However, in order to do this even easier, we can also click on this automatic exposure finding, and some LLMs are going to be used in order to try to find all the patterns that explains if a node, if a class, if a function are being exposed, and then expose those. Okay, so in order to make this much more easier, you can just click on this, job submitted successfully, and after 3 or 5 minutes, well, you will be finding all the exposed assets that the LLM was able to find. And inside these big repositories, of course, it might be complicated to find all the exposed assets, and that's why we also have this filter right here, that if we click on it, well, we are going to be able to find all the nodes that are marked as exposed. Okay, and this is great. Why? Because as I was explaining you before, now we have all the nodes that are exposed to attacks. Now, if we go through all the nodes, clicking audit from node, well, we will be actually performing a security audit on the whole project without actually needing to check the whole project code. We are just going to be checking all these nodes and all their dependencies. Okay, remember that whenever we do an audit from a specific node, that means that we are getting the code of all the dependencies in order to give all the needed context to the LLM. And in order to do this easier, well, after the attack surfer has ended, the page is reloaded, and here we got the exposed assets again. So now what we could do, in order, instead of going node by node, clicking on audit from node, we could click on audit exposed, and basically NaxusAI is going to be getting all this node and clicking for you the audit from node button, or basically triggering an audit from all these nodes right here in order to find vulnerabilities. Whenever you do that, you're going to be finding in the audits table that a new entry was created. You might have a state finished, a state failed, a state running, or well, whatever the state of the current audit is, depending on the number of nodes and the length of the code. An audit might take from, I don't know, maybe 10-20 minutes to several hours. It will depend on the code. However, any vulnerability that is found is going to be appearing in the vulnerabilities table. So if we go back, for example, to the repositories, here we have the Helm repository. I cannot show you these vulnerabilities because these might be real vulnerabilities, but I have here another very easy example, Flash Boom. This is a Python script Flash that is exposing 5 different or 6 different vulnerabilities. Here we have it. I have already run the automatic exposure. It discovered that these functions are being exposed. I have already run the audit expose. So if we go to the repositories and we click on the vulnerabilities, we are going to be going to the vulnerabilities tab, filtering by the repo that we just indicated there. And here we are going to be able to find the vulnerabilities. So if we go here, we can open a couple of those vulnerabilities, and on each vulnerability you will be find the CVSS vector that the LLM has created, the CVSS score, the model that found the vulnerability, the name of the vulnerability, date, and then you will always have a description, remediation, the vulnerability flow, which explains how the vulnerability can be exploited or where the vulnerability is, and of course some remediation code in order to fix the vulnerability. Also, if the context is not very big, you will also find here the audited code that found this specific vulnerability. If you go to any other vulnerability here, well, you will be able to find all this. Also, you can mark each vulnerability as fixed, report, or delete. You can delete if it's not relevant. You can indicate that it is fixed if you have already fixed it, in order, in both cases, to remove it from the table. More things that you can do is that you can also export in PDF all these vulnerabilities. Well, you can actually download as CSV, print, download, report. So you not only can access the vulnerabilities from this table, you can also export it and share it to whoever needs to get this information. Moreover, well, I really hope that you are understanding how potent this platform is, that is going to be able to generate these very complex graphs of all the nodes, see how every single function and class is related to the others, find all the dependencies, and then just getting the exact needed context in order to audit the code, in order to find vulnerabilities inside your repositories. But as I was telling you before, we are also able to find vulnerabilities inside pull requests and commits. And I just want to show you a very easy example. So here you can see, sorry about that, here you can see all the messages. Well, of course, this was for some testing, but this is how a message from Naxus is going to be looking like. So whenever you submit a PR that is containing some vulnerabilities, some issues, some backdoors, some, well, dangerous things from a security perspective, NaxusAI might detect that and send you, in this case it was from a PR, so it will open a comment inside the pull request, and it will create a detailed description of each issue that it finds. Of course, it's going to be having a description, where the code is, CVSS, some way to remediate the vulnerability that it was discovered, and also will indicate the vulnerable code. So the same things that you had inside the Naxus platform, you will also have them inside inside these comments inside the peer that is found to be having malicious code or vulnerabilities, or in case that you already merge a commit inside a branch, NaxusAI is also going to be checking that code, and if something is found, it will be appearing inside a new issue. It will be saying you in the issue the same message that you saw before, like, hey, you commit this code and it had this vulnerability, this backdoor, or whatever. So yeah, NaxusAI is a great tool to find the minimum context needed to audit the whole code of a repository, and also to monitor your peers and your commits in order to make sure that you are not introducing new vulnerabilities or backdoors. I hope you enjoyed this presentation and you find this platform as interesting as we do. We are at the moment looking for some opportunities to develop even more this platform. So if you have any suggestion, if you want to collaborate, if you want to make this work even better in any way, just let us know.